Hello, and in this video, I want to talk to you about how to take notes and how to read the textbook. This year, we're going to be learning a lot more asynchronously outside of the classroom, and we're going to rely a lot more on the textbook. Every year, students tell me that the more they read the textbook, the better they do in the class. There's a lot of information in there, but textbooks are not novels. You don't read them from beginning to end. And they're designed in a certain way, and we really need to understand how they're designed because you're probably reading them not correctly. So I have a handout that I'm showing you right here, how to read the textbook and take meaningful notes. That is available, should be available on a module with this video. And I'm going to go over these steps. But here they are. We're going to do a little pre-reading. We're going to read the opening story, and then how to read through the chapter, and then how to do some review. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. Okay, so here's the chapter 5. And like I said, you don't just start reading from the beginning and go all the way through. Your brain is an incredible organ. It is super curious, and if you formulate questions, you're going to want to answer them. So I have learned this from professors at UNC who specialize in teaching kids reading techniques. And the first thing to do is to spend even just a few minutes pre-reading the chapter. All that means is to look through the chapter, look at the pictures, look at the headlines, try to formulate some questions. What is this stuff? We're just going to look through the book. Oh, look, different kinds of plants. Looks like that's some kind of evolution there. Dogs, different kinds of dogs. More family trees. And we're just trying to get an idea of what this chapter is like. Then you'll have some questions in your head. Maybe some things that you've seen before. The tendency, I know from what students that tell me, is that when you look at the chapter, you read the text and you don't even look at the pictures. That's not a good idea with this textbook because it is very dense. It's not a big book, but every single part of this book has information, and especially the pictures and diagrams. So we're just going to pre-read the chapter a couple minutes, and I would record in your notes a couple questions that come to mind. Just write that down right at the very beginning. Okay, so you've pre-read the chapter, meaning you just leafed through the chapter. You've kind of piqued your curiosity a little bit. Another thing we're going to do to formulate some questions and to put the material in context is to read the opening story. Every chapter has an opening story, and there's a specific content in these opening stories that you're supposed to know. So this is not superfluous. This is necessary information. So usually they're big stories. They're not super specific because they put the unit chapter, they put it in the context of something that's relevant. So go ahead and read the story. It's usually a page. This one's just less than a whole page. Read the story, and then in your notes, summarize it really quickly. Hopefully you can also write a few questions down. Again, those questions are super important. Once you start formulating questions, you're just naturally going to want to answer those questions. So that's a great strategy. So that's the second thing, pre-read and then read the opening story. So you finished reading the opening story. We've spent maybe 5 minutes so far, 10 minutes tops so far. At the very beginning, because we're gonna read the chapter now, or at least the first section. At the beginning of every chapter is this box right here, key ideas. This tells you what you're going to learn. So you don't have to guess, what are the most important ideas? It tells you what the important ideas are. This is what you're going to learn. So you definitely want to start with reading these. Maybe you want to write them down. Maybe these are the questions that you put in your notes that you're going to try to find answers to. But at least read these key ideas. And here's a little secret. If you go to the end of the chapter, those key ideas are written again and they're answered. So if you can't answer those key ideas, they're answered for you right there at the end of the chapter. So don't forget to look at that too when you're finished. But we're first just going to look at these key ideas in here before we start reading. So the next thing to do is to start reading. pay attention to the headings. And there's different kinds of headings. There are these black headings at the very beginning of the chapter or beginning of the section. This is kind of the overall theme of this section. Then there are smaller chapter headings in purple, and these are the kind of intermediate themes. So carefully read this one. This is going to be really important, right? This is going to help you understand the context in which you're going to learn this material. So take a couple notes from this, and I'll keep on telling you this. Always put the notes in your own words. I know it's the most difficult thing that we do, that our brain does, is to summarize and to paraphrase, but don't just copy notes from the book. It helps you remember if you use your own words. So use this chapter heading right here. Formulate into a question if you can, and then write a couple notes. Especially what you want to do is anytime you get to one of these headings here, you want to put this into a question, because what that happens is then you can answer the question in your notes. So here's a really good example where people often kind of confuse themselves. Okay, here's a little section on genetic diversity. Well, if you breeze through this little section on this little title here, you start learning about genotype, about mutations and recombination. And you get to these little words here that are vocabulary words, and the first thing you want to do is, well, I'm just going to define these things. But that's a biology term. You want to know, what is it about recombination and mutation that's important in the context that we're studying? And that is that it creates genetic diversity. So if we make this a question, what creates genetic diversity? That's our question we're going to write in our notes. Then when we get to those words, mutations cause genetic diversity. Recombination creates genetic diversity. It sets yourself up to answer the right questions. Otherwise, you're writing information that's not entirely that's important for the course. Okay, so you're reading through the chapter, you're making questions, you're answering your questions. When you get to the end of a section, there's always these checkpoint questions. Now, it might be a good idea. Well, you should be able to answer these questions, but even before you read, you could go to the end of the section and read these checkpoint questions, because that again tells you what it is that you're supposed to know by the time you finish reading that little section. And it's only a couple pages of reading. Here's 1, 2, a little more than 3 pages, mostly pictures. So go ahead and read these checkpoint questions first. Make sure you understand that that's what you're supposed to answer in your notes. But that's a quick little check to see if you understood that section. Remember, at the end of the chapter, you're going to see those key ideas again, and they're going to be summarized here. You might want to cover those up, try to answer the question in your own words, and then read the answer and see how you did. Another way of reviewing the material is there's always multiple choice questions at the end of the chapter. You might as well try these. On my website, and there's a link to it, under resources for every chapter or every unit, there's a resource page on my website that you have a link to. It'll give you the answers for all these questions. So you could do this question, these 10 questions, say, and get the answers for them. There's also some practice free response questions. And if you need answers for those, I will give you those. But we're going to do some of these in class. There is a lot of vocabulary in our course. You're going to want to keep track of the vocabulary terms. On my resource page, I also have a list of all the pertinent vocabulary. You should be comfortable with all these words. A way of doing that is not to just define them, but to make concept maps, to link them together in some meaningful way, and we'll talk about how to do that. So I hope you found this interesting or useful. I want you to try taking notes in this maybe new way. Look at that handout, which I kind of go through all of these steps again. I will be checking your notes the first couple chapters to give you feedback on them. But another really important thing when you take notes is to make the questions and keywords stand out. Don't write everything exactly in the same style. Make things bold, highlight them, indent, leave space, make them visually appealing so that when you look at your notes, actually things jump out of the page. So you're going to take some notes tonight on chapter 3, and then we're going to have a chance to take a look at those and compare what they look like with other people. So see you in class.